And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Oklahomans Pregame Show, brought to you by Dodge. Today, number 4, Oklahoma hosts Nebraska. And it's a Mardi Gras aspect down here at Campus Corner of Boyd and Asp. Nebraska well represented this afternoon, I would say. I am Dave Morris. I'm joined by the Oklahomans Barry Tramel. Barry, thanks for joining us.
You bet, Dave.
At the far end, we have Jake Trotter.
I can't hear you, but hey, what's up?
And former Sooner great Joe Wiley sitting in today. Joe,
hey,
thanks for joining us.
It's good to be here.
All right, the Oklahomans Pregame Show is brought to you by Dodge. The all-new 2009 Dodge Ram 1500 outsmarts, out-toughs the competition with power, capability, and quality. Its newly refined Hemi engine offers more power and fuel economy than any other pickup truck in its class. Never back down from a challenge. For more information, go to ramchallenge.com. So thanks to Dodge for sponsoring today's event. Also, thanks to Barrett Williamson Architects up top for the internet access today. We are streaming this live on newsok.com, so feel free to submit your questions, and Barry and Jake and Joe will get to those. And Barry, I'll turn it over to you at this point today. Sooners and Cornhuskers, what can we expect?
Well, I think the Sooners have the better team and are probably going to win, but it's the first time in my life that Oklahoma-Nebraska, the football game, is going to be upstaged by something independent of the football game. And that was an event that was last night, a reunion of the 1971 Sooners and Cornhuskers. Of course, guys in the game of the century, Joe Wiley, a great halfback on that Sooner team. And Jake, you were there with me last night at the reception, and Joe, you guys had the reception and dinner. Truly a remarkable event for you guys to get back together after 37 years.
Yeah, I think it was a unique event. And, of course, I was so impressed that OU came up with this idea and to have both teams back. I think it's very unusual really unique to have a game back where we invited the team that won the game to come back and celebrate with us that we lost. And, you don't – only through the years does the players realize how unique the game was, and that it was a game that had actually been publicized the entire year. Nebraska was number 1, OU was number 2, and the game actually lived up to all the hype that had come about before the game.
Do you, over the years, have you come to appreciate how big that game was, or does it take events like last night to sort of remind you?
I think one of the things that I noted to Nebraska is an incredible game, an incredible win. Of course, they ended up being national championship. But the Nebraska sports writers have called me for about the first 20 or 25 years after the game. I got a call every year before the Nebraska game. And, of course, all they wanted to talk about was, of course, I was the punter who punted the ball to Johnny Rodgers on that unbelievable run that he had. And so anyway, they would call me. But over the years, you begin to realize, hey, I mean, that play in the game, it was really a big deal, and people remember it. And it was it was kind of a unique time in sports, in that was the only game on that Thanksgiving Day. And so if you wanted to watch football that Thanksgiving, that's the game you watched. And I didn't realize how many people watched it until, they said 55 million people watched it. And I didn't realize it. So it does. Over the years, you begin to realize how big that game really was.
Joe, you were saying earlier that this was the first time last night you got to know some of these guys. You sat at Jeff Kinney's table.
Right.
What was that like?
It was really fun. Of course, I knew I played with Oakland right after getting out of school, and Joe Blaha, who was a cornerback on that team, and Monty Johnson, who was a linebacker, played at Oakland. And they were such good guys to know. And, we're both from Nebraska, like Oklahoma, has a lot of players from small towns. We grow up, with the traditional values. We treat each other right, and the teams treat each other right and respect each other. Getting to talk, I'd never gotten to talk with Jeff Kinney before. Getting to talk with him last night and tell those stories about different things that happened, not just the OU-Nebraska game, but other things that happened to him, things that happened. My roommate Ed Foster was at the table too, and John Harrison. And to share those stories, even not about just the OU-Nebraska game, was terrific. I think they ought to do it more often with more different things. I think it really builds a camaraderie, not just for the school, but you realize OU is not what OU is without respected competition like this. So, I think it's terrific for the game itself.
We were talking last night, Joe, and you pointed out that that's a fantastic game, but it was really just one in a series of great Oklahoma-Nebraska games, and that this rivalry is much more than just that game of the century.
I think somebody pointed out last night, I think there were it started in 1970, and of course we were not highly rated, but we almost beat Nebraska and Lincoln in 1970, and they were number one. And then, of course, we beat them they were number one in 1972, and we beat them and knocked them out of being number one. So the three games that I played in all were part of a national championship picture. And they said, I think there were 12 games during that period of about 20 years that determined in one way or another affected the national champion, which is just incredible when you're just looking at one game a year between two schools.
What do you remember most about that 1971 game?
Of course, the punt is obviously the thing that I remember.
You got to answer the question, Joe. Was there a clip? Was there a clip?
Well, let me put it this way. I got hit from behind. Now, where he came from, I don't know. And if we'd had instant replay, maybe it'd be different. But the game stands as called, and so there was not a clip. And I think the refs did it. There were only 3 penalties in that game. They were all 5-yard penalties. And what, of course, I always say, regardless of what happened on the play, what an incredible run by Johnny Rogers. That was one I still like to watch the run. In fact, this is an aside. When I got out of college, I had a hard time, just being a fan and rooting. I would root for both offenses when I got out of college. Didn't matter who was playing. I rooted for both offenses, just hoped OU could outscore the other one whenever OU was playing. But I still enjoy great offensive plays, and, of course, that was a great one from Johnny.
Some of those Nebraska guys look like they could still play, Joe. Larry Jacobson, John Dutton. He's about 6'7", 260 when he played. I think he's 6'7", 260 today.
Oh, those Nebraska guys did still look like they could play. And we had fun, visiting with some of them. Of course, Bill Cush, I don't know whether you remember, but he was the cornerback that had to cover Johnny Harrison during the game. And I got to visit with him a good bit, and we accused him of being the Oklahoma plant in the game because, of course, Johnny Harrison had a career day that day. I mean, if he never had one game but that game, he would, that was made a career.
One downer to me from him last night was the fact that Jack Mildren wasn't with us. We last got to chat with you, Joe, when you came up for Jack's funeral earlier this year. How much did you think about Jack last night when everybody was getting together?
Of course, when they originally emailed us about the event and also mailed a letter about it, I really thought that the idea had come about because of Jack's death this year. I thought, they thought about, Jack, of course, died in May, and I thought, they thought we need to do something before the rest of us start getting older as we are. But Jack was such a great guy. He was clearly the leader of the team. He had a great game in that game. He was another player that had a career day in the biggest game of his life. And Jack was such a friend. We visited about things. In fact, this is kind of embarrassing, but when I first came to OU, Jack, of course, being from a small town, he really didn't think my dress standards were quite up to OU's, and he talked to me about it. He said, Joe, here's kind of what you need to get, and you need to look a little better than you do. But Jack was a great friend. It was, in fact, we had a reunion, kind of a reunion earlier in the year. I was inducted in the Texas High School Football Hall of Fame. We had a reunion, and our whole backfield was there. Greg and Leon, even the backup. Grant Burgett was there. Tim Welch was there. And Jack was too sick at that time to come. We made a picture and all signed it. In fact, I've got a few in here. But we all signed it, and he died before I was able to give it to him. So that was real. I gave Richard some copies last night, his brother who also played at OU. but Jack was just such a friend, and I really missed him last night.
Joe, where do you think this rivalry is now? Obviously, all time, it's one of the greats, but maybe lost a little bit of pop, only playing twice every 4 years. What do you think it is today?
That does, I guess, decrease. It doesn't give you as much a chance to be playing for 1 and 2 each year. It's still a great rivalry. I think things go in, cycles. OU's been down a little bit at different times in the last, since I played. Nebraska has. Nebraska will be back at the top. It won't take them long. And just like OU, if we have a bad year or two, we'll get back up there too, because you just work a little harder when things don't go right, and you get back up there. The traditions that both schools have will keep them up there over time.
Well, Joe, we appreciate you coming by. It's been fun, and last night was, we were at the reception. The reception was great. I can only imagine how great the dinner was.
Oh, it was incredible. And Barry and Jake and Dave, it's real fun. I appreciate your having me here.
Thanks a lot. Joe Wiley, one of the magic names in OU history.
Hey.
And a well-deserved round of applause from the crowd here at Campus Corner. You're watching the Oklahomans pregame show. We're live at Boyd and Asp here at Campus Corner. We're also streaming this live on newsok.com. So the Sooners and Cornhuskers go at it at 7 o'clock later tonight. You guys have been talking about the 1971 game and about, 30 ex-Sooners last night and about 20 ex-Cornhusker players got together last night. But there's more ceremonial action today. Is that right?
These guys will be be presented at halftime and be out on the field. And I'm anxious to see the reception for Johnny Rogers when this will be his first step back on the grass at Owen Field since 1971. Last time he was there, it wasn't grass.
Yeah, and he said this is the first time he's visited the field since the game last night.
So that's going to be a fun experience. And, kudos to Joe Castiglione for putting this together, the athletic director at Oklahoma, because it truly is a unique thing for the losing team to celebrate an event. But it was an event that deserved to be celebrated because it was an epic game that was magnificently played on both sides. So I think it's good. I think it's a magic night last night, Dave. I think it's a magic night tonight.
Let's talk more about tonight's game. In fact, we'll get to some scores here. Tulsa has lost to Arkansas 30-23. And the OSU score, by the way, right now is 35-10 OSU in the third quarter. Let's talk about today's game and Sam Bradford in the Heisman race. What are you guys expecting today?
Well, Nebraska struggled on defense, I think, so I expect Sammy B to have a big day, don't you, Jake?
Definitely, but I think that Nebraska, since that Missouri game where they gave up 52 points a month ago, they've been playing better defense. I mean, you hold Texas Tech to 37 on the road. That seems like a lot, but that's actually a pretty good defensive performance.
I will say this. The best thing that could happen to Sam Bradford's Heisman hopes today is for Texas Tech to win in Lubbock tonight. So, I mean, that's the best thing that could happen for Bradford's Heisman
and Graham
hopes.
Harrell to throw 4 picks in the game, too.
Yeah.
So if Texas loses, what does this mean for OU?
Well, it throws the Big 12 South title back up in the air. If Tech can beat Oklahoma State next week, then OU wins out. OU will be the Big 12 South champ. So,
and I think the more you look at it, OU needs Texas to lose, and probably needs them to lose this game tonight, because then Oklahoma has a chance to get 2 huge wins. Tech at home, OSU on the road. There's probably going to be 2 top 10 wins, and all of a sudden, you look at some of the other teams, they'll probably be right there in the national title mix. But it's going to be hard to leapfrog Texas at this point unless they lose tonight.
Yeah, this notion of maybe OU and Texas playing in the national championship game, I think that's a total long shot. I don't think
needed Penn State to lose, needed Alabama to lose.
Too much would have to happen.
Barry, getting back to OU Nebraska, you wrote about Bo Pelini and his connection with the Stoops family, which also goes back to Joe Wiley, what he was saying about the respect between these two programs. Talk about that.
Well, I mean, it's remarkable that 2 guys that grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, I looked up the mileage on MapQuest, 1,109 miles from Norman to Youngstown. 2 guys that grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, were coaching this game tonight, Oklahoma, Nebraska, the powers of the Plains. These guys have deep ties. They went to the same high school. Bo Pelini played for Bob Stoops' father. Bo Pelini's brother Carl lived with Bob Stoops and Carol after they got married. He was a GA at Kansas State. Jake wrote about that. So Bo coached for Bob Stoops in 2004. Deep ties between these two guys. So you're never going to see this series sort of disintegrate into the mess it was in 2004 with the Roughnecks and Bill Callahan. You won't see that happening with Bob Stoops and Bo Pelini at the helm.
And Jake, you wrote today about the Clemson job. What's the latest on that with Brent Venables?
Well, I mean, there's nothing to that right now. That was just somebody throwing out Venables' name. The only person that's been actually contacted is the defensive coordinator at Virginia Tech. So there's really nothing more than a mention by the writer who broke the story. So as far as I know, there's nothing more to it than that.
You're watching the Oklahoman's pregame show. It's brought to you by Dodge. The all-new Dodge Ram 1500, never back down from a challenge. We are streaming this live on newsok.com. We do have a reader question that's been submitted, guys. How much of a concern is the defense for OU?
Well, it's a big concern, and I think if Oklahoma – I read this stat somewhere. If Oklahoma gives up 30-plus points today, it would be the first time in program history that they'd done that in 4 consecutive games, which, Nebraska has a nice offense. Nate Swift's the career receptions leader. Joe Gans is an underrated quarterback. But if they give up 30 today at home – I think that's going to raise some eyebrows, and obviously going against Tech and Oklahoma State, the defense is not going to have a lot of momentum going into those games.
I'm not overly concerned about the defense, and this goes – I think we can look at 1971 as maybe an example. Oklahoma scores so quick. Opposing teams get so many possessions. Kansas State had the ball 17 times last Saturday. So 5 touchdowns is a lot of touchdowns. But when you get 17 possessions, you're going to score a few touchdowns. I think the 71 OU defense got a bad rap because, Joe, you guys scored so much, often so quickly. You or Pruitt or somebody or John Harrison on a long pass, you'd score so quick. You gave the other team quite a few possessions.
Well, that's really true. Sometimes the score would be – I mean, we beat teams really bad, and our defense was on the field more than our offense was. And that was, I mean, we had a great defense in 71, and I mean, it was a national championship defense. We could have won that game, and but Nebraska, they got the ball at the end of the game and scored before it was over, and we didn't have time to score again. So I mean, that's true. I mean, when you go at this level, both teams have great defenses. Losing the linebacker in the Texas game really hurts, especially that type of caliber player. And it'll take time to replace him, but hopefully we'll see that it's been done tonight.
The key is you're putting a lot of pressure on the offense to score every time if you're not getting those. Now, if you do what you did against Kansas State and you get 5 turnovers, you can give up 35 and be okay. But if you're not turning the ball over like OU did against Texas and the offense doesn't get a first down or two at the end, and that's what happened in the Cotton Bowl at that game.
That'll do it for the Oklahoman's pregame show. We've been streaming it live on newsok.com. Thanks to everybody who's watched and participated there. One last thing for the panel here. We'll start with Jake. Your prediction for today?
I'm like Bear. I can't even remember what I picked in the paper, so there's going to be some incongruities. But I'll say 49-24. How's that?
Jake, thanks for your time. Joe Wiley, who played in that epic 1971 game, give us your thoughts on today's game.
I'll say 56-21.
And Barry?
I think I said 48-24, so I'll stick with that. I think Nebraska's good enough on offense to keep it close for a while.
And we'd like to thank the Cornhusker fans for participating as well today. That's the Oklahoman's pregame show. Kickoff at 7 o'clock. Enjoy the game, everyone.
Let's see it.